This video supported in part by...
Playing VR, I tend to sweat. It gives me an edge. So King of Nerds happens to give me an edge too. Let King of Nerds give you the edge. Bye, King of Nerds.
Ever since this year's CES, I've been giving a lot of coverage to My Arcade, in particular, My Arcade's forthcoming Atari-branded products, like that Pocket Player and the Game Station Plus. But I got an email from one of our viewers named Frank, who was asking if I intended to review the AtGames offering, the 50th anniversary Atari Flashback unit. Well, I responded that I really didn't know that much about AtGames, I don't follow them that closely. But then it turns out Frank wasn't the only person to ask. Several other people had dropped me a line in comments saying, "John, we would love to see your take on this new flashback unit." So I dropped AtGames a line, and they were generous enough to send along this review copy of the AtGames Atari 50th Anniversary Flashback Gold. It took like 7 takes to get all that out. I swear I didn't do it the first time. Anyway, I have never owned one of these flashback units. Yes, I've seen them around. I'm aware of what they are, the little plug-and-plays. But apparently it's a big deal and I'm not in on it, so I'm very excited to take a look at this one. We have a lot to cover in this video, so this is not going to be an episode of the Box Appreciation Society other than just a couple of quick point outs that 130 games, this is the Flashback Gold variant of this version 11 of the Flashback. And down here we see some highlights of some of the features included that make me very optimistic for the play experience I have ahead of me, so that's good news. And if you flip this over, you just get a hint of what is to come. And this is 130 in it, but this is 6, 12, like 54 or so of the games. So only about half of them are pictured here. Look, we have a lot to dig into this thing. So let's get the knife out, get this thing cut open and check it out. There he is. Let's see what all we have included. So here is the unit, a very cute little tiny Atari 2600. Looks like a charging cable. Here's our paddle controllers. Look, I mean, it's a 2-in-1 paddle, just like the Legacy Atari paddle controllers. Here's all right, so let's see the CX40 joystick. Man, this is the one that has the buttons on the front, and it feels a little light, but I mean, it feels right. Maybe they went right back to the mold with this. We'll get into the controllers a little bit more. We have a second one, of course. And here we just have an HDMI cable and some instructions. Yoink! So here's what all you're going to get in the box. You have the little console. You get 2 joysticks. One of them has some extra buttons down in the front, which actually mimic some of the buttons on the front of the console. A regular controller up here, power supply. Here are those paddles. Take a closer look at those in just a second. I'm going to start though by taking a peek at the little console. What is it about taking anything that's big and chunky and making it tiny and cute just makes it irresistible? But I don't know what that is, but whatever it is, it's working here in this little AtGames unit. Look, everything about this has differences. Like, you're never going to mistake this for an Atari. You have an Atari 50 logo here. The little switches are gold instead of like that chromium silver. There's 5 of them instead of 6 of them or 4 of them or however many you would get. The very first thing that jumps out at me is no color black and white, which I know that there are no games probably included on this that require the color black and white switch, but that is an important button if ever we're able to expand this unit and want to play the handful of games that use that for a purpose other than color black and white. But that's okay, we'll find out as we dig in a little more. Maybe it's in software or whatnot. In general, this just looks, there are fewer little fins on it, but like at a glance, you know what you're trying to invoke here, and it looks great. Around back, we just have some simple connectivity, left controller, right controller, HDMI, and a power in. And for those of you asking about expandability and adding, yes, there is a way already in the firmware that ships with this, using a special cable that passes power but allows you to plug in a USB, there is a way to expand. Now, it's not packed in the box, but we'll probably get into that more in a later video, but I'll quickly answer, yes, it's possible to add games to this unit, though it's not as simple as just throwing in an SD card. For the joysticks, other than the obvious difference of having an Atari logo here, and it either says P1 or P2 in the corner, and buttons on the P1 in general, I'm really impressed with just how close it is to what I remember from a CX40. And when I say what I remember because I played last week, but I mean what is ingrained in my memory of what a CX40 should feel like when you pick it up and handle it all the way down. And I don't mean just the shape of the stick or whatever, but the way it moves. I probably need to take one apart and look at it. But the texture on it, and even the kind of the ribs on the side as it gets a little narrower across the bottom. Feels great in the hand. I mean, Atari did it right, and AtGames decided to not reinvent the wheel here. Just leave what works and what people love and give them that. I mentioned during unboxing that I felt like the CX40, well, the replica of the CX40, felt a little lighter, though it felt accurate. So I wanted to do a quick comparison. So here I have a real CX40. Now I'm not weighing the cord or anything, I have that out on the table. So we'll just weigh the original Atari, about 135 grams or so, all right? And then we'll check the replica that comes in the AtGames. Only about 111 grams. So definitely a little lighter, maybe not as much, not as substantial as I thought, but yeah, there's a little less heft to it. And then there's the paddle, this red-headed stepchild of the Atari 2600. Look, the joystick gets all of the glory. It's the iconic emblem for gaming throughout the world. And then there's this paddle that sat under the TV or in a box, and you didn't think about it unless you really needed it. And when you really needed it, there was no substitute. Like, you had to have a paddle. And this thing does not feel janky. Like, there's a little tightness to it. Like, it's not free spinning. It is a deliberate paddle. But I can't wait to use it to actually control something, because it feels like it is going to be very precise. Easy to turn, but with just enough resistance. Yeah, that button feels great. And again, textured, everything about it just feels like my muscle memory of these paddles. Okay, we looked at the box, we took a quick look at the hardware, blah, blah, blah. Let's get this thing plugged into a TV and start playing some Atari and see how it does. Quickly, while I have your attention, and before we play some games, I just want to ask if you'll consider, if you enjoy the things we do here on GenXGrownUp and want to support us, you can head over to genxgrownup.com/Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can become one of our patrons and support independent content creation. If that's too much of a commitment, you can always click that thanks button down below this video, or if you just don't want to spend any money at all, I understand. Maybe consider sharing this video out on social or wherever you hang out to someone that you think might enjoy it. Hey, thanks for the consideration. Let's get back to the table and play some Atari games on this Flashback Gold. AtGames. Ooh. All right, here we go. So the first thing, the menu has music in it that I don't want to yell over. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. I come down to the settings where it's a variety of options. So I'm going to come over here and turn off that music. As delightful as it is, I don't want to fight with it the whole time. Up here we have some bezels you can choose from that just fills in the 16:9 aspect on widescreen TVs, because Atari's 4:3. I've chosen this one. I think it's kind of nice. All right, so here are the games, 130 games. And look, I'll flip through them, but you can find all the games online that are included. Look, I read through the list of games that were included, but it wasn't until I was here and browsing them that I'm like, that's here, that's here, that's here, which is, and there's some notable omissions, but there's also some great inclusions that I kind of wasn't expecting. So if you go to any given game, like, you know, maybe I want to come over to Asteroids. So one click into it will give you kind of a abbreviated version of the instructions. So you get to know what's the basic function of the game, what are you trying to accomplish, and you can browse down, what do the difficulty levels do. There's a list of kind of all the combinations of different features you can do. Now, it's not comprehensive. It's not the same as having the manual. You could dig up the manual online, of course, if you wanted to. And from here, you can actually navigate the games left and right. You can also add to your favorites. So if you watch this little star, if I hit my select button on the joystick, that gets added to my favorites, which is up here in my favorites. So there's Asteroids now just added to my favorites. And each game has kind of this brief description. You could star it or not. And if you want to play it, of course, you go, oh, I want to play Asteroids. You hit the button, and in you are. Now, I have noticed powering up a game takes just a moment. It's kind of playing at like a stutter speed when you first start it up. It doesn't impact the gameplay, and so it's not a complaint. It's just I've noticed in some games you'll see just a little kind of and then it's fine. Now, the difficulty switches are right here on the unit. So if you flip them, there's actually a visual representation. So left is hard, right is hard, left is easy. Right is easy. It's just momentary, but it shows you what mode the game is in. Again, no black and white switch. We'll get to that in a second. It is actually something they have considered. So, yeah, so just quickly, let's play some Asteroids just to get a feeling of how it plays. So tapping menu is how you can then get out of the game, kind of. So it opens up this menu, which I will mention this menu feels a little sluggish, so you can watch me hit down, down. It's about a half-second delay in it. It's not a big pain, but in other menus, it actually gets slower. So while in that menu, you can also hop into the save slots. Now, what we have is we have 250 some odd save slots available across this entire unit. And of those, you can save several per game. So you can delete one by hitting down. You can see the menu there, up to load, or I can just save a save slot and it's committed. And the next time I hop in there, I now have that save slot and the other, and to load it, I hit the up. And we're right back in there. You can also exit a game by coming down here and hitting quit game. As I'm flipping through here, I just awesome things that I want to play, like Adventure 2, I have never had in a unit like this. I've dabbled with it, but it's a whole new adventure with a bigger map. I can't wait to dig into that a little more. Let's jump into a game like Barnstorming, the first Activision title that popped up here that's of note. So Barnstorming, again, a little description of how to play, and you pop in, and away we go as a Barnstormer. Now, something else that's in this menu of note is the Scanline filter. Now you can turn Scanlines on or off, but it's not per game. It's for the entirety of the unit. And so I have to turn them off because I have this old TV that actually has some Scanlines in it. I don't know how well you can see it on video here, but I have them on. And let me go turn them off. I think that's fine that it's not across the board. I don't know why you wouldn't put it universally and put it in this menu, but maybe it was an afterthought. But it's here and it works, and I like to leave them off personally. I want to flip through a few more of these games to kind of talk about some more interesting stuff that's in here. Beam Rider, M Network game, Burger Time is here. Now 2600 Burger Time is not awesome, but Burger Time is here, as well as Burnin' Rubber, which is kind of bump and jumpy, I think. I don't know if it's a port or if it's just another kind of car game. Have you seen this Burger Time? Let's look real quick. I mean, it's a valiant effort, but should Burger Time be in the 2600 in general? I don't know that it should, but it's great to have it here because, you know, it's a piece of Atari history. Happy to have it here. You've got Chopper Command, you've got Combat, Combat 2, which again was a prototype. It wasn't actually released, I don't think, or maybe much, much later. Activision has another title here, Decathlon. I see Crackpots. Some of these I've already favorited. Dragonfire, they did get the Imagic license. And while we're on the topic of Imagic, Demon Attack. Yes, it is included here. I've got to play some Demon Attack. Ow. You know, there's something to be said for having the joystick just pretty much molded after the original CX40, the muscle memory. Like, you know, right is pull with your thumb, and left is lean with your index finger, as opposed to everything else was kind of thumb driven these days. The fact that this stick, I remember how to play based on how it feels, awesome. Dragster, Enduro, look, so much Activision stuff. There's Fishing Derby and Freeway. And then there's other stuff like Kaboom, a paddle game. We're getting into paddles entirely in just a second here. Somebody asked, is Hero here? Oh my God, is Hero here? Absolutely. I love this game. I fly my little guy around, drop dynamite, save guys. So many of you asked, hey, is this game here? Is this game here? I'll flip through these and also up on the screen, I'll put the full game list that was published and you can look and see. But it's well represented across. Activision was the big boom here, of course. Prototypes like or later model things like Save Mary. What a great game. That's on here. Oh my God. Okay. Star Master is here. So I talked about not having a black and white switch. So what they have done for Star Master is they've leveraged the difficulty switches since they're not being used. So the wrapper around Star Master clearly is doing a little bit of tomfoolery, but let me show you. And also, as I start this is a great example. If it plays music at the beginning, you'll be able to hear how the emulator is not full speed when you first start. So just listen. The music just took a second for it to get to full speed, and then it was there, and it was okay. But so yeah, you start a game, and you're flying around, and you use the difficulty switch not the black and white switch to open up that galactic map. So, okay, that fixes it for Star Master, but if we want to expand this at all, look, that's a small limitation, but it's understandable. But was one more button, was one more switch worth it? I feel like you could have added that in and it would have just eliminated the problem entirely. Why add a workaround when you could just add a switch, right? Another thing, I want to show you how save slots work. If you have a save slot, like I will create one here, and then when I exit the game, when you launch the game, it's going to invite you to start your save slot right away. So let's launch Star Master. And it comes up to this menu. I can go to the save slot and just hit the button, or I can go up to start new game. Now, while we're here in the S's, I have got to call attention to this oddball. I don't know if I played all 130 games, but I've played dozens and dozens, and this was the only real disappointment. You know why? Space Invaders, great. Let's play it. What the heck is that? I mean, yes, it's Space Invader-y. It's probably more like the original arcade game, but that's not the milkshake that brought this boy to the yard. I'm here for Atari 2600 games. And like you could tell, it's really weird. Look, let me hop into the menu. Save states don't exist. The scanline filter is a left and right, not a toggle switch. This is clearly a different wrapper for an entirely different thing. The game is fine. The game is fine, other than anomalies where you can move your ship after it's been shot. So watch me get shot and then keep moving the Hulk. Like that's little stuff like that. I mean, it's not arcade. It's another port. And it's a decent port. Rapid fire, apparently. Well, that's okay. Enough deviations to say we know it's not Atari. We know it's also not actually the arcade game. So I don't understand why it's on here. Just give me the 2600 Space Invaders. We had one viewer notice that the Tempest prototype is on here, and the question was asked, can I control it with the paddle? Great idea, but it's not. Used with joystick controller. I even tried it just in case it was undocumented. It's not. But on the topic of the paddles, let's transition to talking about the paddles. First of all, I want to note that they have a section specifically for paddle games. So when you get them swapped out, rather than swapping back and forth a lot, you can just go to all the paddle games, of which there are just 2 pages or page and a half here. So let me switch out to the paddles. So I have my paddles hooked up, but here's the thing, you can't navigate anything with the paddles. So I really have to have my joystick hooked up to port 2 to get anything done. So let me show you. Let's go into, I don't know, Breakout, right? You got to go into Breakout. So let's launch. It gives me the instructions. And then I'm going to set this down. I'm going to go back to my paddle, of course. And then it warns me about wireless joysticks not working, which I don't have. So is that a bleed over from some other unit? I don't know. So here's my paddle. And you can see I was right. The one-to-one works really well. It's a little tight, which, I mean, I could put a little graphite or something in there, but the tightness is the only thing that stops this from being great. And I often find this weirdness sometimes when you have the paddles plugged in and this is in port 2, and that's like the menu doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Like I can move left and right, but the menu to back me out is not backing me out. I've got to power it off and back on, or move the joystick back to port 1. It feels like a firmware issue that could be addressed and fixed, but it's irritating that it's here on the gold unit. You know, you kind of build things for the gold unit and then back it down for the lesser units, but because I think the non-gold doesn't have those paddles probably. So in general, what I'm saying is if you have the paddles connected, don't expect everything on the joystick to work like it should. You're probably going to have to go to the console back and forth. All right, I know what you're thinking. Hey John, you threw the instructions away. The problems you're having are probably well documented in the instructions, right? Yeah, well, I dug them out of the trash, I uncrinkled them so I could read them, and you can see right here, it just says, some stuff might not work when you're using the paddles. So I don't think it's just me, although I do think, again, it's something that could be fixed in firmware, so I'm not gonna weigh this too heavily on my review. But let me show you how it does work, so let's play some Kaboom. Now at least I can come in and do my save slots, so I'll go in and hit the save slots, and I'll come over here and I can save one, absolutely, and I can come back in here and I can go and load a save. There we go. Then I switch back to my paddle and I'm off to the races. And you can see as soon as I put the joystick back in port 1, everything's working great again. It's just something in the firmware doesn't like those paddles, and you need to get to this joystick to control things like save state and the rewind feature that I want to show you next. So I have Adventure going. Let's go to my favorites. Adventure is definitely one of those. So let's hop into Adventure. I will select to option 3 and hit Start. All right, so what you can do, this last button here is the rewind button. So I can come down, I can navigate. Now this is a destructive rewind. So let me get eaten by the dragon. Oh no! So by tapping the rewind, there goes my progress. And I can watch things unwind, but I can't go forward. That's now the maximum. So if you keep rewinding all the way back to the beginning of the game, so see that's all there is. That's all the rewind we have. We're now maxed out. So you can't like play a little, go forward, go back. Some titles like the Flashback Portable we looked at here not too long ago, you can actually go forward and back. Not a big deal, just something worth mentioning. And while we're in Adventure, I've absolutely got to come in my save slots where I have saved just before I go and unlock Warren Robinette's Easter egg. Boom! Thank you, Mr. Robinette. Ha ha ha. The only 2 areas I think I haven't shown you are pretty obvious. Your recently played, of course, is a list of your 10 most recently played games that automatically update as you play something else. Alphabetical, of course, and then the Atari games. It just takes all the non-Atari games out of the mix, which I'm not sure why you'd want to do that because some of the best games are non-Atari games, but you can do that. They just separate it out because it is the Atari 50th anniversary. So all in all, look, you've got the save states, you've got the rewind, you have the Activision titles, you have the Imagic titles, you have some decent paddles with some wonky paddle implementation, but I mean the paddles are there and they behave well. Firmware could fix that. I'm optimistic firmware could fix that. So I'm not going to make that like a huge ding against it. All these little minor things in general don't take away or detract from my fun, the enjoyment that I have had playing with this Atari Flashback Gold. There's no denying that this Atari 50th Anniversary Flashback Gold unit is beautiful. And the emulation on it, aside from minor nitpicks, is almost impeccable. So that's not what we're comparing here. I mean, that's kind of the baseline for AtGames. They've been at this for a while. They clearly know what we're doing. Let's talk about in this unit the things that really impressed me. The game selection and assortment on this is pretty remarkable. 130 titles, and across the spectrum. This is not just Atari classics, but more modern Atari stuff, cool homebrews, Imagic, Activision, M Network, so many things on there that while there are some obvious omissions, certainly someone who is a fan of Atari is going to find plenty to love on this thing. The joystick also, I would put it like it's like 90% of an original Atari joystick when I feel it in my hand. I mean, it clicks a little differently than I would expect. It's a little bit lighter as we looked at, but it's remarkable, really. That joystick, it works great. The other controllers, those paddles, they're pretty good. I would put them more at like the 60 to 70% of the feeling that I remember from the original Atari paddles and the play experience. A little tight, as I mentioned. I feel like I could tweak those to make those even better, but they don't detract from the games, although if you're just using muscle memory, you probably have to turn a little farther or a little harder than you would before to accomplish the same thing when you are playing the games. I'm particularly happy with the fact that on the stock firmware, AtGames supports expansion and adding your own games. Now, it's not as straightforward as just putting the games on an SD card and slapping it in there. It requires a little special knowledge and a special cable to get it done, but it's doable. So if you're a hobbyist, you probably know how to do this easily. If you're not a hobbyist, it's not a barrier or a scary thing for an end user. So I think this is the nice sweet spot where if you know enough to do it, you're going to be able to do it and you're not going to be disappointed. And if you don't, you won't know what you missed out on. So I think that is a positive, is a huge positive for this unit to know that it is expandable if you care to spend a little time understanding how to do it. If there's enough interest, and I expect there probably will be, you let me know in the comments of this video. I can do a follow-up to this review to show you what equipment is required and what the steps are in the process of adding your own games to this unit. Again, just let me know and that'll inform whether or not I should spend some time putting that video together. Okay, let's talk about the weird stuff with this unit, the things that keep it from being perfect. First, there's the paddle implementation. We explored that plenty. And it's not just, it doesn't impact your playing of the games at all, but the navigation around the games, like getting into, grabbing the stick to navigate and then getting into it, pushing start and the menu button not working perfectly. That could all be fixed in firmware. But for those that aren't going to update the firmware in the future, you're going to have a little bit of a wonky experience. Once you're in the game, fine. It's just the experience around using the paddles is not my favorite and probably is going to put me off of playing the paddle games as much as I otherwise would. The next thing is what you saw, kind of the sluggishness of the menus sometimes and navigating the menus. And then ultimately how, the emulation starts up kind of stuttery. This is one of those things, again, that doesn't impact the gameplay at all. There's a polish that's missing that could, I think, be fixed if you wanted to, but it will not detract, again, from your ability of having fun playing these games. And the third is that goofy Space Invaders. I mean, if that's the Space Invaders you're going to give us, don't put it on there. Everything else is just what you remember, and then you're going to jump in Space Invaders and go, this isn't the Space Invaders that I wanted to play. And it seems like it was added, maybe they had 129 games and needed one more. So they put this weird Space Invaders on it, maybe. It's again, not a huge detriment to the overall experience, but it's so out of place when everything else is so right. So to Frank, the viewer who wrote in asking if I would review this unit, you may be onto something. I really wasn't paying that much attention to AtGames, but this was such a nice experience that maybe I should be in the future. Thank you for your suggestion. All the pros and cons in my gameplay and the experience taken into account, I would like to award this Atari 50th Anniversary Flashback Gold from AtGames 4 tokens out of 5. I don't know if I'm ready to say this is the best Atari 2600 plug-and-play you'll ever see, but it's pretty doggone good, and it's gonna give My Arcade and their Game Station Plus a run for its money when that comes out later this year. I'm gonna throw some links here and here over my shoulders to some other Atari coverage we have done here on GenXGrownUp. I sincerely hope you found something to enjoy in this video though, and I cannot wait to talk to you next time. Bye-bye.